Hi, this is a Curvy 3D tutorial where I'll be showing you how I made this cartoon pirate by sketching in Curvy. Start off with, I usually load a sketch in the background using texture load image plane to get a front and a right view. So we're going to work from the top to bottom, start with the head. As you can see, it's made out of lots of different objects, which all together give you the impression of the pirate head. Just removing these one by one so you can see the different parts it's made out of. So the fundamental shape we need for the head is this sort of oblong rounded object. So it's a rounded object, so we'll use a lathe. I'm going to draw just 1/4 of the head with a curve, and then use the curve rulers to make it into a nicer, cleaner shape, and the grab tool to pull the curve into shape. Then use curve mirror to make that symmetrical and scale it into position. You can see that's given us pretty much the full shape of the head just with one lathe. Now I'm going to add on some eyes. These are just spheres which are scaled and pulled into place. Copying the sphere for the eye will give us the iris or the pupil. I rotated that 90 degrees round and flattened it to make the dot in the middle of the eye. Using the groups panel, I can drag one sphere onto the other to link them together into a group. And now with two eyes, I used Control-C, Control-L to make a mirrored copy. With two eyes, I'm now going to sculpt the cheeks. We're using mirrored sculpting mode, so we get both cheeks at once. Next, we need a nose. I'm going to make this out of 3 spheres. One for the bridge, one for the end, and one for the nostril. And then I'm going to group all these spheres together and turn them into a voxel skin using mesh voxel merge group. So I can delete the old spheres, press S a bit to smooth the nose, and then use mirror to make the other nostril. Just move this nose into place. For this guy, I'm going to have a separate lips and teeth model. So again, the lips are a lathe object, and scale that into position. And then we're going to make a similar lathe inside for the teeth. I'll just copy the colour of the skin off my original object and paste that in with Control F onto my new objects. So now for the teeth object, you can see the shape of the lathe I'm drawing in the left view, and increase the diffuse colour a bit so he's got nice bright white teeth. Again, I can drag these objects onto each other in the groups panel, so I can move them all when I move the top of the group. Give that a bit of a angle for his grin. Next, I'm going to make an ear out of a shape in the top view, and then I'm going to use the curves menu to make it into 2 lines and scale down the other curve very small, which gives us a sort of rough cartoony ear shape. When I've got the shape almost as I want it, I can press K to turn it into a mesh, so it's no longer a lathe, it's an easy to edit mesh. Control C and edit mirror paste mirrored, make his ear on the other side. I'm just going to remember to save at this point. And now I can rotate the ears so they line up how I want them with the head. There we go. So now he's looking a little bit weak-chinned, but we'll make his beard in a second. Next, I'm going to draw some eyebrows. I draw the top of the brow and the bottom of the brow with the lathe tool, and then use the curve ruler to make it a nice clean shape and move those into position. Again, for copying, I use Control-C and Control-L to make a mirrored copy. Now for the beard, I drew the front and the sides. In this case, I'm using 4 curves to do the front, sides, back and front, and the left and the right. Once I get the beard in the rough shape I want, I'll do a little bit of sculpting to add some detail. Now I'm adding his moustache with just a line object. So I change the radius B to give it a pinched end. Press S a bit for smooth, and copy that again. Control-C, Control-L to make a mirrored copy. When I select all of those moustache pieces and beard pieces together, I can change the colour of all of them at once. So now we want to add a little bit of definition to the beard. So I'll increase the resolution, switch to my sculpting tools, and make some subtle lines to show the flow of his beard. Again, this is using the symmetrical sculpting tool that you can see on the left below the pinch slider. And now I'm going to use the sub tool, but I'm going to increase the pinch slightly so it makes nice sort of grooves into his beard. And then that's pretty much it for his beard. Just fix the colour on his eyebrows. And next, let's move into his hat. So for all these belts and sashes and bandanas and things, I usually draw like a C shape or an E shape, and then use the curve two-line lathe to make a copy of that curve and drag it to the other side of the object, and that makes a nice sort of sash, bandana or belt, any way you need one. For the hat, I'm going to look at the main shape of the hat, which is sort of a cup shape. So I'm going to draw half of that cup shape and use the curve rulers to sort of tidy up the shape, and then again turn it into a two-line lathe and move the other curve down. So that's given us the general overall shape of the hat, and now we're going to step in with the pull tool with a big radius and sculpt the more detailed shape of his hat by grabbing and pulling the mesh. Again, since we've got the mirror sculpting, symmetrical sculpting on, this will affect both sides of his hat at once. Just tweak the ambient and the diffuse light to make it quite a dark hat. Scale it down to fit our sketch. That's just about right. And now I'm going to add in some more detail on the hat. We want a skull and crossbones on the top of the hat. So for the time being, I'm just going to hide everything I don't need at the moment. Hide the hat itself. And now I'm going to go in with the slab tool to draw my skull. So I only have to draw half the skull, and then use the curve mirror X to draw the other half. So I need some eyes and some nose holes. So I'm going to draw those on the side, and then clone the curves and use the scale tool to scale it to the other side of the head. Again with the eye, clone, scale, move it to the other side of the head. So that's the skull down. Now we need some crossbones. I'm going to make these out of a tube and a blob. So first the tube, just rotate that into position behind the skull. I can either use the scale handles or the radius and height in the object properties to set its size. Next, with the blob tool, I can draw the mass on the end of the bone. Using the curve ruler, again, the semicircle ruler, I make that a nice clean shape. Rotate into place. Use the move tool, holding shift to move it forwards and backwards in space. And now once I've got all those three pieces, I'm going to join them together with a group and then merge the group and delete the piece as I don't need them anymore. A couple of smooths, Control C, Control L, and now we've got our skull and crossbones. We could bring the hat back and move the skull into position on the front of the hat. And make sure we've got the right depth for the bones. Okay, that's his hat done. Now we'll move on to his jacket and his torso. So in the side view, I'm drawing the front and the back, and the front view, I'm drawing one side. And then I want that to be symmetrical. Also, I want it to be hollow, so I remove the cap on the ends, and I turn on the symmetry, the lathe symmetry. And now we've got the overall shape of the coat. I'm going to make a copy of that shape, which we're going to use for his shirt underneath his coat, and then hide the copy while we work on his coat. Just set the colour down so you can see what we're working with more easily. Now his coat is open at the front, so the way we're going to do that is convert it to a mesh and then use the selection mask to select all of the parts of his coat which we want to cut out. So I'm going to carefully, with the lasso brush, select those bits which were going to be in the opening of his coat at the front. If you make any mistakes, doesn't matter, you can hold down Shift to add to your selection or Control to subtract from your selection. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm using Control and dragging the lasso to remove bits of my selection. So all these yellow and red bits are going to be cut out when I press Delete. And now we have a thin sheet which is representing his coat. I'll just show you the double-sided there. We want to add some thickness, so we add the thicken modifier, turn down the extrude a bit, and now we've got a nice coat with a beveled edge. Once we're done, we can bake the action, or press K to bake it, which says that we're finished with that modifier. Next, we're going to add in a little ruff. So I draw a very wiggly line in one view, and then a U shape and an N shape. And these create sort of a frill on his shirt. Now we can pull those bits all together. We want some buttons for his shirt, so I'm going to use a cylinder with a very decreased height, and that's going to be our button. Move that into place, scale it down. We want the buttons to be gold, so we're going to make them sort of an orangey yellow colour. We want them also to be shiny and reflective, so I'm going to use the light metal map which came with Curvy, which should be in your Documents Curvy 3D folder, and use that as the diffuse light, which makes a nice shiny effect. Copy in some more, draw a quick box for his epaulette. Next we're going to draw his arm. This is going to be a lathe with 3 curves. We're going to draw the sides and then we're going to draw the middle. So add curve along the middle. But to make this work properly, we want it to be that curve to be at the front and move it forward a bit. And we also want it to be symmetrical, which will automatically add the back to make it a fully rounded arm. Next, we want a cuff. Again, as for the belts and the bandanas, this is like a squared off C shape. We can use the ruler to tidy it up, make it into a 2-line lathe and move the second curve to the other side of the cuff. We want this to have the nice gold colour again, so we find something with gold, copy, and then press Ctrl F when we paste it on his cuff. Next, we're going to use a different modelling technique. We're going to use something called box modelling and the poly tools to make his hand. So I'm going to make a poly cube and then use the mesh grab tool to turn that into a poly object. Select one edge at the front of the object and use divide edge ring to add a loop of new edges crossing over with that edge. We want to split it into 4 chunks, basically to add for the 4 fingers. So we're going to individually select faces along the front of where the fingers are going to be. Select a finger base and then press extrude and bake until we've got 4 fingers extruded. This is the finger up to the first knuckle. So once we've done the extrusions, we're going to select all of those first knuckles again and extrude some more. Bake the action, move them into place. If we need the fingers to be longer or bent again, we can extrude again. We're only making a very simple shape for the hand, so it looks quite cartoony. We've got an extra edge here which we don't want appearing on the top of the palm there. So I can use dissolve edges, collapse edges, nope, dissolve edges to remove that extra edge and turn it back into a quad. Now I'm going to extrude out the thumb, again using the extrude tool, and then bake, and then move the thumb's knuckle into place, extrude again, tweak into place, until we've got a rough hand shape. And with that in place, we can turn it into a subdivision object by using object properties sub D, just adding another bend in the finger. Then when that's done, turn on sub D, which will give it a nice smooth skin. Just going to move his wrist a little bit up to curve that out. And there's a fairly simple, quick to make hand shape. Give that the colour, move it into place, and the other arm's just going to be a copy of this arm with the hand tilted slightly. So we pull our bits back together and we're going to move on to the legs. These are just going to be made out of lathe objects. Very simple, just sketch down each side of the object, tweak them into place with the pull tool if you need to, add a colour, and we're done. Very quick. So again, the sort of squared off C shape to make the cuff of his boot. The bottom part of his boot is a bit more sort of rippled at the top, and then it pinches in where the sole attaches to the top of the boot. So we're going to basically just follow the lines in the sketch to give it two sides to the boot. Use the ruler to sharpen up one side so it looks like the boot's slightly crumpled. Increase the resolution. We need some space for the toes in the boot, so I'm going to press K to turn it into a mesh, use the pull tool and drag out the toe. Now that's a bit too large a radius. There we go, smaller radius. Drag out the toe until it matches the sketch. With those parts done, I'm going to paste in some colours and then select the boot, just tweak that to a darker brown, and then we're done. Very quick foot and leg. Again, we use the groups panel to group the feet onto the leg. Select the leg, Control C, Control L to make a mirrored copy, and then rotate that slightly. So we're almost done with our pirate. We just need a couple more belts and buckles. So we've got one side belt crossing over his shoulder and one around his waist. Again, we're using the sort of squared off C shape. Make a copy of that curve to make it into a two-line lathe. Let's just make it hollow, remove the cap, turn that into a 3-curve lathe, move that into position, squash it towards his chest a little bit so it's not sticking out so much. And then that's in place. We can just give it a colour, using Control F to paste on the colour from another object. Let's draw his belt. Again, it's that sort of sharp C shape. Quick belt, and then we want a belt buckle. So I'm going to zoom out and draw the belt buckle with a lathe, with a slab. So drawing one half of the buckle and mirror X to make the other half, curve offset to make a sort of an inner curve for that buckle, press S a bit to smooth it and move the inside bit of the buckle into place. When I'm happy with the shape of the buckle, I can move it into place on his waist, and that is done. We need one more piece to finish that buckle, which is a little line object just crossing through the middle. So move that into position and use the radius to shrink it down, and that is his belt done. Just a couple more pieces now. Let's draw his sword. Use a couple of lathes for the handle and the hilt. As always with these lathes, just drawing the two sides of the object and it will join in the middle. Use the curve rulers to make it cleaner shape, copying a texture, a colour. For the blade, we're going to use a loft object. So we draw one long curve along the length of the blade, and then we're going to draw two shallow V shapes for the top and the bottom to give the lengthwise shape for the sword. So there's a shallow V shape and then a large shallow V shape. We're going to select these and move them into position at the top and the bottom of the sword. There we go, that's almost right. Just need to scale and move that into position. And give it a bit of a curve at the end. Tidying up with curve rulers. We want a metal effect, so we're going to copy our gold. Make sure it stays double-sided. and turn it into a steel colour instead of the orange. Okay, we need a little bit of background information. Let's add a bit of driftwood with a parrot on top. So we're sketching in the rough shape of the wood with a lathe, the top and the bottom of the shape. Press K to turn into a mesh, scaling the mesh out a bit, and now we're going to use the trim tool, trim surface, just to cut squarer sides off that shape. Once you're done with the trim tool, use bake action or press K as ever. It's just sculpting a little bit of detail onto this bit of driftwood using the pull brush and the sub brush. Just scrape along the surface, add a little bit of detail. And finally, a little bit of life. Add a parrot. Roughly sketch his beak. And then press K, turn into a mesh. Use the pull tool. Just add a little bit of character to that beak. And we're just going to draw the rest of the bird as a couple of lathe objects. They're not the focus of the picture, so they just need to get the rough shapes right. And we get the illusion of more detail than there really is. A little eye. Using Shift move to move it out of the screen. And then another lathe for the frill of colour on the top of that bird. And that's pretty much done. We're going to add another final parrot using the same trick. And then we're going to add a floor so we can catch some shadows coming off his feet. And that is our pirate pretty much finished. We took a view screenshot and saved it out and added a little bit of ambient occlusion. But there we go. You can try this out for yourself today for free on curvy3d.com.